Right now, almost 1 in 3 car buyers want to buy completely online, and if your dealership can't close that deal, someone else will. Accelerate My Deal Elite gives you real online checkout, ID and insurance verification, and dealer control without changing the way you work. Visit dealdoers.com to learn more.
Welcome to Daily Drive for Friday, March 6th, 2026. I'm Jake Neer in Detroit, in for Kellen Walker. Today on the show, Chrysler CEO Chris Feuell has left Stellantis. The Iran conflict threatens global automakers, especially Asian brands. And Ontario is courting Korean automakers to build a Canadian plant. Plus, Cox Automotive executive analyst Erin Keating joins the show to talk about the company's latest dealer sentiment survey and what this year's tax refunds might mean for new and used vehicle sales.
I'm still a betting woman that maybe May and June and July start to show us some interesting follow-on trends because higher income households tend to file later. And they're going to benefit a lot from these new exemptions.
Let's run through all the news you need to know to keep up in the auto industry. Chrysler CEO Chris Feuell has left Stellantis for personal reasons. Dodge CEO Matt McAleer will now oversee both Chrysler and Dodge. Feuell joined Stellantis in September 2021 and also led Alfa Romeo in North America. Under her leadership, Chrysler dropped the 300 sedan and became a minivan-only brand. Chrysler sales rose 29% in the fourth quarter and were up 1% for all of 2025. The brand plans to launch a refreshed Pacifica this year with design elements from the Halcyon concept. The war in Iran is threatening global automakers, especially Asian brands. According to Bernstein Equity Research, Toyota accounts for 17% of Middle East sales, Hyundai for 10%, and Chery for 5%. Chinese automakers who dominate Iran's market face the biggest direct hit. But Bernstein says the greatest risk is rising oil prices from disrupted tanker shipments through the Strait of Hormuz. That could crash auto sales well beyond the Gulf, hitting gas-dependent automakers like Stellantis hardest. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford and Federal Industry Minister Melanie Joly are courting Korean automakers to build a Canadian assembly plant. Korean brands sold nearly 250,000 vehicles in Canada last year, capturing 13% of market share. That's according to the Automotive News Data Center. Only GM, Ford, and Toyota sold more than Kia alone. Ford says he's ready to roll out the red carpet for them.
Well, there's 200 and roughly, last count I had, 230,000 cars. And anyone who sells 230,000 cars needs to open up a plant here.
Meanwhile, Joly is tying a $12 billion submarine contract to auto investment.
Obviously, because the procurement process is now in its final mode, I can't comment what's going on. But I'll be clear. We want a car plant.
Joining me now to talk more about that story is Greg Layson, Automotive News Canada's digital and mobile editor and host of the Automotive News Canada podcast. Greg, great to have you here on Daily Drive.
Always good to be here.
All right, so you were there at the Nexstar plant opening where this all unfolded. South Korea's trade minister was literally sitting right in front of Doug Ford on stage. So I'm curious, what the atmosphere was like in the room. Did it seem like this very public courtship is gaining any real traction with Korean officials?
I mean, in the room itself, it was pretty muted. I think everyone's sort of walking on eggshells when it comes to any auto investment in North America. Essentially, no one wants to upset Donald Trump or upset trade negotiations between Canada and the United States. So there was no outward applause or approval of this. Is it gaining traction? I don't know if it's gaining traction or momentum, but I will say, as a basketball coach, I can see the full court press is being employed. Melanie Joly, our industry minister, was also there. She is pulling no punches. It is essentially as blunt as it comes. We want an auto plant. And Ford, who in the past has already spent $500 million on a battery plant, another $5 billion on a battery plant in Windsor, they are on board with whatever it takes to land an auto investment in Ontario. There hasn't been one here in decades, and this is as close as we've ever been, even if they are just words in a courtship.
So interesting. Now, Hyundai Canada CEO Steve Flamand gave a pretty diplomatic answer when you asked him at AN Canada Congress, basically saying we'll see where it goes when it comes to this issue. Given that Hyundai already has 4 North American plants and global overcapacity is an issue, how realistic do you think it is that Ontario's pressure campaign actually results in a new assembly plant?
Just from that standpoint alone, I talked to Lana Payne about this, head of Unifor. She admits there's overcapacity, that there's available production elsewhere. I've talked to Auto Forecast Solutions about this. They also say it's probably unrealistic. So I don't know. One of the things an insider told me was if the goal of the Ontario and federal governments are to lure Hyundai here to build electric vehicles, which might be something different because 1 in 4 vehicles globally are electric. So if the idea is to build electric vehicles here and export them, that might be a play. But here's the thing. The federal government here just offered up 49,000 electric vehicle spots to Chinese brands. And so Hyundai might say, well, what's in it for me if you're going to sell my competitors' vehicles? So there just continues to be more and more hurdles and roadblocks and things in the way to get this to happen. I never even thought of that issue of the Chinese EVs until someone in the inside brought it up. So it's possible that the whole idea is for electric vehicles to be built here, exported globally, not necessarily to the United States. Remember, we've got the critical minerals, the battery factories. It's not lost on me that LG Energy Solutions owns the Nexstar plant in Windsor. That's a Korean company. So there are a lot of breadcrumbs that would lead me to believe it's possible and it's plausible. I don't know if anyone pulls the trigger at Hyundai to come here yet, given all of the other factors.
Fascinating stuff, Greg. Really appreciate you digging into this for us, and we'll be watching this as it develops if it does. Thanks so much for joining us here on Daily Drive.
Anytime.
Coming up, dealers are feeling optimistic about a spring sales bounce despite economic headwinds. We'll talk with Cox Automotive's Erin Keating about the company's latest dealer sentiment survey. That's next on Daily Drive. Are you a dealer creating a workplace culture your employees are proud to be part of? Applications are now open for the 2026 Automotive News Best Dealerships to Work For program. This isn't just an award, it's a chance to get real insight into what's working at your dealership and where you can improve. And we've expanded the categories this year, recognizing everything from technician experience and leadership development to AI enablement and employee retention. The registration deadline is April 17th. Find out more and apply at autonews.com.
Hey, quick question. What if nearly 1 in 3 customers who walked onto your lot were ready to buy before they ever got there? That's not a hypothetical. That's actually happening right now. Almost 1 in 3 consumers say they want to complete their car purchase completely online. The question is your dealership able to close that deal online, or are you handing it off to someone who is? That's where AutoTrader's Accelerate My Deal Elite online checkout comes in. Accelerate My Deal Elite isn't just another digital retailing tool that takes the dealer out of the equation. It's built with you in mind. You stay in control of the deal. Pricing, terms, the whole thing. While your customers do the heavy lifting up front from the comfort of their home. We're talking real online checkout, built-in ID and insurance verification, and a seamless experience that fits right into the way your team already works. No ripping out your process, no retraining your whole staff, just more deals done faster. And here's the thing, your competitors aren't sitting on this. The dealers who move first are the ones capturing those online buyers. Don't let that be someone else's win. Reach out to your AutoTrader rep today and ask about Accelerate My Deal Elite, or visit dealdoers.com to learn more. Your customers are ready. The question is, are you?
Welcome back to Daily Drive. I'm Jake Neer. Cox Automotive's latest dealer sentiment index shows dealers facing a cloudy outlook as they come down off a difficult end of 2025. But there's optimism ahead. They're expecting a spring sales bounce fueled by higher tax refunds and improving February numbers. Interest rates, political climate, and affordability remain top concerns. Automotive News senior retail editor Dan Shine spoke with Cox Automotive executive analyst Erin Keating here at our Detroit office about what dealers are thinking going into spring.
Erin, thanks so much for joining us, coming from sunny Atlanta to cold, dreary Detroit.
Yes. So sad. I heard it was sunny over the weekend, and I always prefer to join you guys when it's sunny. But
You missed it. We saw the sun briefly.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
We want to talk about the Cox Sentiment Index, the most recent one. It's maybe mimicking the Detroit weather. It's a little doom and gloom out there. It's a little cloudy. What's going on with dealers?
I mean, it is, but they are seeing that the sunshine's coming their way, right? You know, it's key to remember the timing of the survey. This was done towards the end of January, beginning of February. So a little bit before some of these headlines have come out recently around some global conflicts and such that might start to change some opinion. But most of them were feeling, of course, coming down off of last year. Fourth quarter was a little bit difficult. January is always sort of a slower time. Weather was a major impactor. But February, you know, to be honest, we've just started to see some of the results, and they sort of match what their optimism was, that February sales started to pick up. And so they do see that spring bounce, as usual, is something to be optimistic about.
Yeah, there is a little optimism. They do talk about that spring bounce. People are getting tax refunds,
right? And
they expect them to go buy a car, or used car, new car with that.
And the refunds are higher. I mean, we're already seeing them come in around 10% higher than they normally are at this time already.
What are some of the headwinds that dealers are kind of citing when they talk to you for this study?
Yeah, I mean, the economy, the political climate still is up there. That was something that actually stood out to me as I kept looking through the numbers, because I know we've talked about them a little bit, but that the political climate has actually climbed up. And I think that's, you know, really pointing to that fatigue consumers and dealers and the general public has around the headlines, just consistently driving our mood. Consumer sentiment has been volatile over the years, so that's I think they're struggling wrapping their heads around how are consumers responding to these headlines and what that mood indicator really means for their business. And, you know, affordability is, we're never going to stop talking about that, I feel like, but that is a concern for them, is making sure that they can find the right vehicles for the right customers at the right prices, because that's still a concern of consumers.
Is it as simple as to say that a tax refund is going to make someone go buy a car? They still got to pay for the insurance, which is very high. Gas prices may be going higher. Is it really that much of a panacea to all the kind of the economic doldrums that people kind of feel themselves are in?
Yeah, it's a great question, because I do think that our instinct is to say, well, you get a windfall, you want to go spend it. But we do know we're working with a consumer who has been struggling with affordability. We also know that most consumers, when they're looking for cars, are typically shopping by monthly payment. So they're not always actually taking into consideration the total cost of ownership, TCO. So even though we know insurance and price of gas and everything is continuing to go up, in that moment when they're looking at that payment, they're typically, you know, more focused on what that monthly payment is. And that has been what's been really stuck because of the interest rates. And it's starting to come down a little bit more. What the tax refunds typically do is they show up in used cars, right? And we're seeing this. Manheim is going really proactive right now. We're seeing a lot of business turn in Manheim, which means that dealers are getting excited. They're getting new used vehicles into their inventory because they know they're about to get the rush, the spring bounce. But we do know, again, coming off this consumer having been a little bit more economically challenged last year, there's a good chance that some of those refunds are going to go to paying off debts from Christmas or going towards helping pay for other things in their households that they've needed to catch up on. I think the two places we're going to see it is, yes, for sure, it might help with some down payments in used cars, or at least getting them a little bit towards there. Service and maintenance, I think that's really where I would advise dealers to look. You know, keep a real strong eye on who's coming through your service lanes, not just to make sure that you're getting the best bang for your buck on the RO, but also, is there good equity mining you can do there to sort of flip people into new vehicles? And then the last thing I would say about tax refunds, which I think is really interesting, is that the increase is hitting disproportionately higher income individuals as well in certain geographies because of the SALT exemptions. So I'm still a betting woman that maybe May and June and July start to show us some interesting follow-on trends, because higher income households tend to file later. So, and they're going to benefit a lot from these new exemptions. So it should be interesting, and hopefully maybe it will string out a little bit longer than it normally does. You know, fingers crossed for the dealers.
Interest rates always a topic. There's, you know, probably going to be some change at the top of the Fed. How big a factor is that in, again, affordability? It's one kind of just one more piece of the puzzle that maybe will push that consumer who's been on the sidelines for a while into a showroom.
It's a big impact. I mean, we do know when we did our quarterly call in December that the number of weeks it takes for annual income to purchase a vehicle really hasn't changed all that much over 13 years, 10 years. What's really doubled is that household interest burden on the loan. So any push in the right direction on interest rates is certainly going to help the industry because they will, even a point is a huge deal for consumers. But interest rates are still high, and the Fed fund rates don't always translate immediately to what the auto loan rates are going to be. So it's a little bit more complicated than just saying, if Fed fund rates are lowered, auto loan rates are lowered. But we're optimistic that auto loan rates would keep coming down this year.
Well, you kind of mentioned earlier that I think could be a factor that might impact sales is this, new war, whatever conflict going on over in the Middle East. It would seem to me that, again, you have people who've been on the sidelines because they're of the instability of a number of things, the economy, tariffs, and the milks, eggs, whatever it might be. Right. And so they've, have really gone out and bought a car. Now there's more instability for how many weeks this may come. But gas prices might go up. They're expected to go up, which is like another household burden that maybe they don't want to. How do you think that could factor into what we see in the coming months in the showrooms and in sales? Yeah,
I think a little bit will depend, as we've seen since the beginning of last year, on the cycle of headlines, I would say. Are we flip-flopping almost every day with what we're hearing? I think we do have to take into consideration how sort of head-on-a-swivel type of action can really create chaos for the customers and really put them in the paralysis by analysis, if you will. If it's a little bit more of a drawn-out process, I could see people starting to normalize the news in the background and still making the decisions they have to make. I mean, a lot of the times people really just need engines and four wheels to get to where they need to go. And we're sitting on vehicles in operation out there that are really old. And so people are just, there is demand out there. The question is going to be, will automakers be impacted as far as getting vehicles here? Will gas prices drive them more towards the hybrids, which we already anticipated anyway? And are there enough affordable hybrids out there? Will we actually see that organic tick up in EV adoption because gas prices go so high and because there's really good deals to be had on used EVs and newer EVs, even without the tax credits? So I think those are the couple things that I'd be looking for. But at the end of the day, we know our U.S. consumers are a quirky bunch. And when they need a car, they go looking for one. And dealers are often the best place to go help you figure out what can you put in your driveway today for the right price.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask at least one service and parts question. Again, we know the forecast is kind of a flat sales for new vehicle growth, so that might put a little more impact, a little more attention, focus on service and parts and their profitability. How important is that back end of the dealership going to be in 2026? It's
the little or big engine that could. I think that every automaker I've talked to and every dealer I've talked to, the focus is on fixed ops. And it's because both of them win when fixed ops is doing well. It's not just a dealer profitability part of the equation. The automakers are also certainly invested in making sure that's happening. And there are a ton of vehicles in operation that need the work. And there is a competitive environment out there for dealers with independent shops, repair shops and collision repair shops and things like this. And so I think that the dealers are really focused, and the ones that I've spoken to are just continuing to ask, what do we need to be thinking about? How do we need to be bringing these customers into our service lanes? How do we focus on convenience and pricing comparison and things like that? So I think it's going to be a big engine that could, and that they're all going to be focused on it for the year.
So I think the next dealer sentiment comes out in June, I want to say. What do you expect we'll be talking about in June?
That's a good question. I love being asked if I have that crystal ball. Yes. I think that we're probably going to see that the spring bounce did happen and did help and did keep sales going, at least at a normalized pace. What I'm really hoping is that we're not going to have as much volatility, and so that they see that the spring went okay and that they're feeling decently confident going into the summer, and that we can see some sustained growth. But we may see some pushback because of consumer sentiment. And if the new Fed comes in and doesn't necessarily do anything with interest rates, or there becomes some unraveling there, we should expect, I think, for the foreseeable future, political climate, economy, and market conditions stay in those top 5 factors that dealers
not the
are
weather this
on.
time.
Not the weather this time. Hopefully, because otherwise we're opening up a whole other can of worms politically to discuss it. But yeah, I think that the top 5 factors are going to continue to swirl around as the top 5 factors. It's just a matter of how the severity of one over the other.
Great. Well, the index is always a great window into the dealership and seeing what their folks are thinking about. So we really appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, Dan. Good to see you.
You too.
That's Daily Drive for today. I'm Jake Neer, in for Kellen Walker. Thanks to automotive news journalists Hans Greimel and Vince Bond Jr. for their reporting for today's podcast. We also had reporting from Greg Layson of our sibling publication, Automotive News Canada. You can get the latest news on dealer sentiment, the Iran conflict, and everything happening in the auto industry at autonews.com. Come back over the weekend for our Weekend Drive edition of the show. Our own Larry Velaquette and Michael Martinez talk about the biggest stories from the past week, including impacts of the Iran conflict on global auto supply chains, as well as Ford's efforts to use its new battery business to spin profits out of costly EV investments.
I'll admit I was on this podcast a couple weeks ago talking about how when automakers do things beyond automaking, it tends not to work out very well. But I will say this seems like, to me, the best idea they have, as opposed to just letting a plant sit idle or taking an even bigger loss than the $21 billion they're already losing on EVs here.
We'd love to hear from you. Let us know what you think of the show and the topics we covered today. Send us an email at dailydrive@autonews.com or leave us a voicemail at 313-444-2774. And if you enjoy the podcast, remember to like, leave a review, and subscribe so you never miss an episode.